Your generous support makes this ministry possible. Thank you.
All right, wanted to start off today's discussion going through, first off, what I like to refer to as the core of counseling, intro to counseling. This is going to be a little bit of a review for you guys, seeing how I assume you guys have taken counseling foundations, most of you. Those of you that haven't will repent and ask the Lord's forgiveness. Most of this is kind of covered in the Counseling Foundations course, just the general aspects of what it means to counsel, why we do it, what we're hoping, expecting. And then from there, I kind of want to transition into a discussion, a larger discussion, getting into the issue of what we're dealing with this whole semester, the idea of trying to help people who need help, trying to present to them truth, but realizing we live in a culture that doesn't appreciate the idea of truth. And want to get to that. How do we give people truth when they say, there's no truth, silly rabbit? And we want to try and get to that idea of trying to help them understand that. But before we do that, I want to get to this idea first. This is adapted from an article by a gentleman named Dr. Gary Collins. Let me say, Dr. Collins, in my opinion, is one of the greatest writers in the field of Christian counseling that you can get. Any of his books, I think, are well worth having in your library. He's a wonderful author. I would say one of the first thinkers in Christian psychology and counseling that really helped think through a lot of the issues when it came to how does the world of Christianity and the world of counseling and psychology come together. Nevertheless, this specific information, what he titled The Core of Counseling from his big book, it's a big yellow book like this thick called Christian Counseling, great book, resource to have. He goes through and he tries to give some areas of help, first off, to give general ideas of what it means to be a good counselor. And I kind of just wanted to refresh. That's all this really is, seeing that you probably got some of this in Counseling Foundations. First off, some of the goals of counseling. What is it that we want to do? Let me ask you guys that question first. Okay, when you think of what you as a counselor, and I know, again, the majority of you are not going to be professional counselors in that sense, a license, paid. By the way, they're making about like $120 an hour these days, so they're doing okay. But nevertheless, and you're like, oh, I think I'm changing majors all of a sudden. I know you're not going to be that kind of role. Some of you may be. But when you think of what you're going to be doing, the average person helping the average person, what are some of the things that you want to accomplish in that? What are some of your goals when you counsel other people?
Help people sort through their problems.
Sort through their problems, definitely, yeah.
Help them see truth when things are confusing.
In the midst of all their craziness, let them know there is still a truth that's out there. What else?
Stay biblical and allow the Holy Spirit to work.
Definitely. Know that we have a standard of truth, namely God and His Word, and let the Spirit of God do that work in the believer's life. What else do you guys have as goals?
To help them find that truth for themselves.
Right. Instead of just always feeding it to them, right? Give a man a fish, eats for a day. Teach a man how to fish, eats for a lifetime kind of mentality. These are all things that we want, and they're all encapsulated in some of these ideas. May I say one of the first ones for me is what's known and articulated within the Westminster Shorter Catechism. The chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. This is something that we already talked about when I went into the discussion, that little handout that I gave to you, Counseling Psychology at Emmaus Bible College. Don't get me wrong, I want to help people. I want to, in the midst of their ugly, nasty, crazed-filled lives, bring them hope and help as we know it from God's Word and His Holy Spirit. But the end-all goal of why I am doing that is for this reason, because that's why they're created. God bless you. I realize more than anything else, and that's one of the lines I put in that handout that I gave you. My job is not just to make people better, it's to make them better for God. That goes for the Christian and non-Christian. Now, obviously, the ways we do that for the non-Christian are a little bit different. We kind of want to get them saved first before we start dealing with all the other issues. That'd be the hope. But nevertheless, for the Christian and non-Christian, the chief end of every man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Please realize they are not separate realities. Some people think, yes, I just have to glorify God, but I have to be miserable doing it because that's the only way that God is glorified. I realize that living the Christian life is one that of necessity must be filled with joy. Now, I realize that comes in different ways. Some people are much more reserved in their expression of joy, much more attuned to kind of the day in, day out of just enjoying God. Others are much more vocal and verbal and demonstrative of their joy. I'm not saying one's better than the other. All I'm saying is if you're a Christian and your chief end is to glorify God, there of necessity must be joy in that life, even in the midst of the crud of life, right? Even in the problems that are going on. So to me, the greatest goal is what we are trying to do here, to make them better, to glorify God, not just to make them happy, adjusted, doing well. I mean, the realization is that there are a lot of well-adjusted, happy people in this world, right, that are going straight to hell. I know a lot of Buddhists that are very happy people, very well-adjusted, psychologically speaking. I have Muslim friends that are some of the nicest people, good families, strong marriages, great relationships with kids. I know people that are atheists that have no religious affiliation whatsoever, that are doing great in life. And so, psychologically speaking, they're okay. Spiritually speaking, I'm almost falling here, I'm okay. Spiritually speaking, they're lost. And even though they're okay in this life, there's an eternity to come. And if I don't help them with the greater reality, I as a counselor am not really helping them, right? And that's our goal. That's our greatest goal. Some other ones that obviously flow out of that. Self-understanding, an objective, perpetually alert helper is to assist those being helped to get a true picture of what is going on within themselves. I am in this world of craziness and hurt and despondency, and it is really, really hard for me to get my head up and see the reality of what's going on. So you as a counselor can come into my life and say, hey, listen, I know it looks bad here, but guess what? God's got a bigger plan. You don't see it right now, but I'm on the outside and I can see it, and I want to help you see it too, right? That's why I love the saying, I'm one beggar trying to tell another beggar where to get some food. I'm no better, I'm no worse. It's just I've got some hope that I want to share with some other people, all right? And that's what we're trying to do. We're helping people see the bigger picture. Communication, to communicate and receive communication about feelings, thoughts, and attitudes. To me, this is obviously one of the bigger realities that go into counseling. That they need to be able to communicate with me what's going on here, and in order to live with other people, they need to be able to communicate with others as well, both to give and receive. And we're going to see here in a bit that comes in different ways. Communication is not just what comes out of a verbal communication. The ability to pick up communication on multiple levels is a really important aspect of what good counseling is about. Learning and behavior change. Not only do we want to change internally what's going on, but we want to help them change what they're doing on the outside. Certain actions, certain attitudes, to be willing to launch out and practice new learning, to challenge them, to not just think, hey, what do you think about this? And would you consider this? But actually to push them a little, to give them a little love tap on the rear side, to actually try and do something different that is apart from what they're doing right now, so as to achieve these greater goals. There's a big word called self-actualization that I would love to render more so as Christ-actualization. I want to help people not just be better Ben Matthews or Heidi Coppins or Nate Crevilians. I mean, as wonderful as those people are, my ultimate joy is to see you become more like Jesus. And here's the great thing. By becoming more like Jesus, you become more like Heidi. By becoming more like Jesus, you become more like Nate. You become who you're created to be when you get more like Jesus. That to me is awesome. There's a great book by C.S. Lewis called The Great Divorce. Has anyone ever read that book before? Oh, I will pray for you tonight because you guys need to get that book on your shelves. The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis. In a nutshell, the idea is it's a fictional account of a group of people going between heaven and hell and the realities that are going. It's fictional, but the idea that Lewis is trying to communicate is what are the great joys of heaven and what are the great sorrows of hell. And there's this one part where the bus of people, literally like it's a bus, they're traveling to heaven, and they notice that as they get closer and closer to heaven, things become, as he calls, more real. Colors become greater, smells become stronger, people seem to have more substance, comparatively to hell, where his imagery of hell is people that are despondent and kind of gray and bleak and without any joy or feeling. And the idea is that when they get closer to heaven, when they get closer to God, they become more rich and real in who they are. And to me, that's what we want for the people we work with. Again, Christian and non-Christian. My hope and joy working with non-Christians in dealing with the problems of life, and we're going to talk about this later, in the non-Christians that I've had joy to work with, inevitably we start with whatever the presenting problem is, depression, anxiety, OCD, whatever it is. And because I do believe it to be an ethical issue of sorts, I'll start there. But you know what inevitably happens? We start talking, I start connecting with them, I start empathizing, I start relating, and they ask me this question that I love to hear. So Ben, let me ask you, what do you do in this situation? Oh, well, let me tell you. And I love this because they're now asking me about my life and how I go through these issues of life with a really special guy in my life named Jesus. And I'm able to share with them, well, this is what I do. Can I share with you? But they're asking me about it. I mean, I don't have to go knock on doors and give tracts out. They're coming to me. I mean, I'm getting excited just thinking about it. That's what I want for Christians and non-Christians, for them to be more like Christ. And realize they're not in it alone. The benefit of support, encouragement, the community of Christians, the local church. I mean, all of these are goals that I want to be able to push. It's a reason why, again, I gave you this book by Larry Crabb called Connecting to read this semester. What I love about what Crabb does, he really realizes the necessity of the local body of believers to be the first place of healing. For so long, churches have said, someone comes and they say, I've got this problem. Can you help me out, pastor, elder, leader within the church? And you know what the pastor, elder, leader of the church did? Hey, there's this psychologist down the street. He only charges $125 an hour, but he'll really help you. To which I say, yeah, he may, but man, you guys in the church are missing out on the opportunity, the joy of helping that person. And to me, this is what Crabb and others have really been really understanding, that it's the church that has the joy of ministering into people's lives. So then, with those goals, I realize there are some attributes, some characteristics of you guys. And again, before we get into the notes, brainstorm with me a little. Okay, now we know what your goals are. What do you think? What do you want for yourself and others in this class to be characterized by in terms of being a good counselor? What does a good counselor look like? If you were to, okay, you're going to see my artistic abilities now. Ready? I know. You're going to be blown away.
Can I say Jesus?
You can say Jesus. That's a good start. You should look like Jesus, right? This is your counselor, okay? I know you are amazed by my artistic abilities. I realize that, so hold your applause till later. If you were to look at this individual, and we've already started the process, this person definitely should look like Jesus. Can you flesh that out a little bit more for me? A beard, is that brown eyes or blue sash? Or, I mean, what does that look like?
Genuinely cares about it.
Genuinely cares. What else?
Humility.
Humility.
Patient.
Patient. What else?
Kind.
Kind. He's looking more like Jesus. It's like a reverse hangman of some sorts, right? Yeah. What else?
Honest.
Honest. He's got a nose.
Respectful.
Pardon me? Respectful. He's smiling.
Genuinely concerned.
Concerned. He's got a beard.
He was marked by his relationship with God, which then enabled him to reflect God.
With God to reflect. I mean, there's all these realities of who Jesus is that when we look at him, we realize, I want to be Jesus to people so as to achieve those goals, right? I want to be able to be a real, compassionate, humble, patient, kind, honest, all these attributes and more. And so obviously what I'm going to give to you here is not an exhaustive list, but I would say at the very least, if you want to be a good counselor, you better start looking a little like our Lord to be able to help those in need, right? So, a couple of things to say the least. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but some ones that I think are important for us to appreciate in the context of counseling. Warmth, caring, respect, possessing a sincere concern for people. I put up John 4. What's that story in John 4? Remember? 3 is Nicodemus. 2 is Baptist. Is what? I heard it.
Does that have to do with a woman?
There's a woman at the well, but the woman is not well. Ooh, that could be the name of a book. I just made that up on the spot, by the way. Wow. I put that up there because, and at times I think we just read over these passages, right? Yeah, he gets to the well, he has to go, give me a woman, but I have water inside me springing up. And we read through it and we miss, I really think, the heart of these stories and not let the Holy Spirit just really grab our attention. This man, for instance, what is the problem with this story? Why would a Jew reading this story of Jesus meeting with a Samaritan woman be such a scandalous account?
It doesn't happen ever.
Why does it not happen ever?
They hate each other.
Jews and Samaritans. Samaritans are these half-breed Jewish Babylonian exiled people that came back, only believe in the first 5 books of the Old Testament, have their different rituals, have their own mountain, have their own worship. On top of that, not only is it a Jew and Samaritan, but it's a man and a woman. The Pharisees used to have a saying, God, thank you for not making me a Gentile, and thank you for not making me a woman. I'm not saying it's a good saying, but it gives you an idea of how they used to think about women back then. The idea of a Jewish man talking to a Samaritan woman. Even she says it. How is it you, being a Jewish man, should ask me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink? And then John gives that little caveat for Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Just in case you missed it. Yeah, and remember Jews, when they came from Galilee down to Judea, if they went up or down, they would go right past Samaria. Jews don't go through Samaria, which is why that whole story about the Good Samaritan is such a blast in the face of Jews. Because those ideas of good and Samaritan in a Jewish mind don't go together. It's getting off the point. Nevertheless, Jesus is a perfect example of what warmth and compassion and love, going out of his way to be honestly concerned for this woman, is. Genuineness, an open, sincere person who avoids phoniness or the playing of some superior role. This got to the humility aspect that you guys talked about. Again, the idea, listen, I am not in a position, I might have some more training, I might have some more experience or wisdom, but that does not make me any better than you. I am one beggar trying to tell another beggar where to get some food. Saved by grace, and I want you to experience that same grace. And that needs to be a big part of it. There's a movie, I might show a clip of it from later. Has anyone ever seen the movie Patch Adams with Robin Williams? Great movie. And there's this one scene where he's talking to this fellow doctor in med school, and she's like, I want the white coat. I want the respect. I want to be called doctor. And Robin Williams is like, yeah, but respect's not found in a white coat. Respect is showing respect to other people that you genuinely care for. And she's like, oh. She was so about the title, I am Dr. So-and-so, when she's totally missing the point that it's not about who you are, it's about who you're serving. And if you lose that, then don't bother trying to get the white coat because you're missing the whole point of it all. And that's definitely what we're wanting here. a genuineness of helping people know that we're not any better, we're just more blessed by God's grace, and we want them to experience that as well. Empathy, the ability to feel with the counselee. Let me ask you this question. I put the word sympathy up there as well. What's the difference between the two? What's the general idea between the difference between empathy and sympathy?
If I feel sorry for someone, that's sympathy, but if I actually have emotions as if I'm going through sympathy, putting myself in their place.
Is which one is which again?
Empathy is the one putting yourself in their place and actually feeling the emotion
Right.
with them.
Why can you feel that? Normally speaking. A lot of times you might have gone through it yourselves, right? I mean, empathy specifically speaks to the reality that you are able to enter into the hurt that they're dealing with, mainly because you've experienced it yourself. Now, that's not always going to be the case, right? So that's where sympathy comes in. That even though I can't fully understand what you're feeling because I've never gone through it, I still feel bad for you. I genuinely hurt with you. Because what Paul says is, you're a member of the body of Christ, and so am I. And when one member hurts, all the members hurt. Even if I can't fully, this summer, my wife and I, we went through some struggle. My wife was 10 weeks pregnant, and we had a miscarriage while we were up in Canada earlier this past July. That was a real big heartache for us. I mean, the excitement of the possibility of a new life and a new addition to our family, and then having that lost. That was really hard for us. Well, I had some people that came up to us and said, we are so sorry for your loss. And I really appreciated their genuine concern and love for us. But then there were other women that came to my wife and said, you know what? I know what you're going through. I lost a kid at this phase of life, or I had a miscarriage here. And these women, and again, it's not one of these things that you bring up at tea time, right? I mean, it's not a discussion that you have a lot of times, but when it happens, it's like these women just came out of the woodwork and were encouraging my wife in such a wonderful way. Hey, I know what you're going through. Hey, I've been there before. This is what you're feeling. I'm praying for you. Can I tell you how honestly helpful that was for me and my wife? To know both the sympathy of those that couldn't totally understand it but cared for us, and the empathy of those that did know and were able to care for us as well. That's what you guys bring to a good counseling session. There's some things you guys can't understand, but you can still care for them. There are some things you can understand, and you can that much more care for them. Remember what Paul says in Corinthians? With the comfort that you've been given, that you also may be able to comfort others. I mean, this is what the whole idea of empathy is about, and that's what you can bring as a good characteristic of a counselor. Personal understanding, relative absence of immobilizing conflicts, hang-ups, insecurities, or personal problems. Now again, this does not mean that you are so aware of yourself that you're just pretty much perfect. You have no problems ever. And as such, I'm now able to help anyone that comes my way. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that you're at least aware enough of your issues, your problems, your conflicts, so as to not be immobilized in the help that you bring to others. I'll give you an example of this, okay? You guys have traveled on airplanes before? I don't think anyone's ever been. If you've been in this situation, let me know. But you know when they warn you that if those airbags should come out of the sky, with the things on your mouth and things like that? If you're traveling with a young child, what do they recommend you do first? But wait! We're going down. My child needs oxygen. Shouldn't I do the selfless thing and make sure my child has the oxygen first? How mean, how cruel it is for you to tell me I have to put it on myself first. Help me out of my craziness. What's the rationale that the airlines give that put it on yourself first and then the kid?
You take more oxygen.
Pardon me?
You take more oxygen than
I take more oxygen than the kid. Are you saying I'm fat? Is that what you're saying? I see. I guess. I see what you're saying. That's fine.
While you're trying to put that on your child, you can pass out, and now both of you can't.
And both of us are done, right? Oh, my kid needs that. And not only does the kid not have a mask, but I don't have a mask. But instead, if I go the other route and get the mask on myself first, okay, I'm breathing. Now I can help my kid. And now we're both alive. Understand that's a similar idea of what I'm trying to encourage you guys to do as well. That there of necessity needs to be a personal reflection in your own life, a dealing with the own issues in your life so that you can effectively help others as well. So you don't put both of yourselves out of commission. That's what I really want for you guys. And again, that's not to say that you've got everything figured out, that you've achieved personal. I am not into Keswick theology where you can achieve personal holiness this side of glory, all right? But I do believe we need to be willing to at least look at ourselves, reflect upon ourselves, and see, is there things in my life that are perhaps getting in the way of helping others, all right? And I think that's an important concept to consider as well. Questions with any of those characteristics and others that you gave?
Well, I was just wondering about the empathy for the sympathy
Mhm.
thing. You know how sometimes someone can be like having a tough time, the other person's like, oh, I've done that, I've had that before.
Right.
You know, like, how do you go about making sure that you're not just saying, yeah, I've been there? And like, because like, sometimes they feel like that even.
Sure. Are you saying that like someone says, oh, just kind of get over it, I've been there before, but I got through it? Is that kind of what you're saying? Kind of attitude?
When they're like, oh, yeah, I know, I had that.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's an important question. You understand what she's saying here, right? I mean, she's essentially saying, you're struggling through something, and I come up to say, oh, I've gone through that before, but I got over it really quick. How come you're still struggling? Understand, empathy is not so much the understanding that we've both gone through it, but the fact that I can appreciate the emotions of what it feels like to go through it. The duration is not the issue. It took me 3 days to get out of my funk, but I know how it feels. It could take 3 weeks for them to get out of their funk, but I still know how they're feeling. The first is an understanding of the emotions. The second is almost more of a judgment on why it is you're not still out of that. Now, there may be some reasons as to why they're not getting out of it that we need to address, maybe some loving confrontation, but we do that after we've kind of earned the ability to do that. And we're going to talk about that a little later as well, the idea that I do believe we need to earn the respect, the connection with a person before we can start really exhorting them in ways that they need to. Does that somewhat make sense in terms of what you're asking there? We need to be careful that not to make those quick judgment calls, which is really what they're saying. Well, I'm not out of it. How come you're not out of it? That's a judgment call, right? We need to be careful not to make those judgment calls early on in our counseling relationship. We may need to, but I believe only after when we've made enough investment in a person's life. Yeah, it's a good question. Quick techniques, attending. Try to give undivided attention. So we got the goals, we've got your characteristics. Now here are some of the actual, I don't know, maybe we can call them like methods and techniques of, oh, hey, there's a great title for a class. These are some things that just the basic nuts and bolts of what it means to be a good counselor, right? Some methods and techniques. Attending means trying to give undivided attention. Trying. No, you're not always going to be perfect on that. Some aspects. Eye contact, all right? I cannot tell you, this is one of my biggest pet peeves because I am so trained in keeping contact with a person when I talk to them in counseling that it bothers me a lot when I'm just at church or I'm in the dining hall and someone I'm talking to does not look at me. I'm like, I do this with my son all the time. I grab his head and I say, look at me. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, should I touch his eyeballs? No, I won't do that to you. I'm like, I so want, because to me, eye contact communicates attentiveness. And understand, as much as I want that, the person you're working with deserves that. Understand, when this person comes to you seeking help, that in itself is a huge step of faith. That they've said in themselves, you know what, I am such a place that I need somebody's help, and I'm going to go to this person. Whew. That's a big step for someone to do, let me tell you, okay? They have earned the right for you to give your undivided attention to them. One way you can do that, make sure you look at them, all right? I like to do this every once in a while and freak people out, you know, if I'm having fun with them where you're talking to them and all of a sudden you just look at them and you look behind them and you kind of freak out. What do you think people will do? And I'm like, no, I was just looking at the time, that's all, you know, just kind of freaking out. And this is hard. I'll tell you honestly, if you guys know where my office is, I have a door like this, okay, with a window on it. And I try as intentionally as possible to try and put the person behind the door so as not to let people that are walking by, because inevitably if someone walks by and they see them, what do you think they do? Hey, who's that? Okay, why are they seeing me? Okay. And the other thing, I try not to look at people, and this is especially hard when people come to my door and they see me in there because they can see through the window, and they're doing this number. and trying to get my attention, and I will just ignore them. Person's over there, and I will just talk to the person and just ignore them and ignore them. It's hard. But I guarantee you, if I'm working with this person and that person at the door is trying to get my attention and I do this number, what's this person going to do? They are all of a sudden going to look, and we've broken that line of communication. I guarantee you they're going to start to feel pretty conscious. Oh, there's someone at the door. And all of a sudden, it may not be that conscious, but they're all of a sudden going to start shutting down. I will do everything I can. If a person knocks at the door, that's the only time I might answer them. Boom, boom, boom. I'm like, you better get out of here. I'm getting my gun. No, I won't do that. To me, it's really important is what I'm trying to say, okay? That's just one aspect. Posture. The reality that this individual, again, is not just you as a person are not just communicating with your words, but with your body language as well. Generally speaking, you want to have a posture that is somewhat interested in a person's discussion. So, tell me your problems. What am I communicating, by the way, by doing this? Yeah, I know you're here for help, but pardon?
I'm tired.
I'm tired. It's been a long day. I haven't had lunch yet. So just get your complaints out and we'll get this thing done right, all right? I mean, I know I'm not verbally saying any of that. I'd be pretty stupid too. But understand this posture communicates a lot. Instead, my encouragement to you to sit up, maybe actually to lean in a little. I mean, consider a good conversation that you've had with somebody, right? Normally, you're in a relaxed position and you're really interested. You want to hear what they're saying. You actually are interested in how they're saying it and you want to engage with them. Consider that when you're counseling with somebody, that your posturing is important in terms of what you communicate to the person, of whether you're really paying attention or not. Again, there's this great scene out of that movie, Patch Adams, where Robin Williams goes to talk to the doctor. And the doctor's sitting in his desk, Robin Williams sitting at his chair, and the doctor is reading through the files, has his coffee, and he pours it. And Robin Williams is just talking. He's just talking. He's pouring, he's stirring it. And Robin Williams starts talking about it, and he's like, yeah, and sometimes I think I can just go to the moon and make a new colony there. And the guy's like, very good, very good. Very good. Yeah, and Robin Williams just starts talking crazy stuff, and the doctor's like, very good, that sounds good. All right, wonderful. That's a great session. Thank you for coming in today. And the guy's like not even connecting with him because he's more concerned about his coffee and reading through his files. I mean, it's such a disservice, dishonor, I really feel, to these people that are coming to you for help to not give them the attention they deserve. You need to be very aware of how you communicate both with your words and with your body in this time. Gestures, generally speaking, again, we want to use gestures that are appropriate to the conversation. Not ones that are freaking them out and ow, not too Italian and things like that, but nevertheless, ways that we can appropriately hear what they're saying and encourage them that we are listening to them. Another aspect is what I call active listening. And I use that word because generally speaking, when you think of listening, it's usually a little bit more of I just sit here and I use my ears, which that's part of listening. Active listening goes beyond that in the sense that you're actually taking in and responding to what you're hearing. Sufficient awareness of one's own conflict. This goes back to that personal awareness idea. First off, that you know yourself so as to be able to help others. But this is avoiding verbal or nonverbal expressions of disdain. Let me give you an example with this, okay? Someone comes up to you and says, you know what? I've been struggling with pornography a lot this past year. I'm really struggling with it. I was wondering if you can help me. What? You're struggling with, Okay, let's deal with that. Now, let's be very clear. Is pornography an evil sin that is very dishonoring to God? Most definitely. I do not deny that 1 second. And there should be within you the realization that sin in whatever form, pornography or gossip, lying or murder, is heinous before a holy God. And there should be a disgust whenever you are confronted with the evils of sin. But when I communicate my disdain of such sins that are confronted to me in such a Again, I'm kind of grandiose in my doing, but imagine if I just do it normally, like, ooh, you struggle with that? Whoa, okay. Just that. How do you think the counselee is going to respond after I've responded my disdain in that way?
We're going to tell you anything like that again.
Exactly. You think they're going to open up anymore? Probably not. I was just kidding. I really don't struggle with it. It's a friend. His name's Fred. I'll leave now. I mean, why would they want to open up anymore when all of a sudden they've seen your such disdain? Because you may be just disdainful of the sin itself, but what are they thinking?
You don't like them either.
The person. I mean, I want to love the sinner and hate the sin, but all they're hearing is, you hate the sin and the sinner. And the realization is that I need to be so careful. Can I tell you, I've heard some pretty wild stuff about the struggles and the sin that people get into. But I need to be so careful on how I respond to those communications. In fact, just this week, someone was telling me, yeah, I don't know, but I struggle with this thing. I don't know if you've heard of it, and they mentioned the struggle. And they waited for a second. They're like, almost like anticipating me to like, scream out loud in disgust and horror that they struggle with this. And they, okay. And then they started opening up more. And not showing my surprise and shock, even if it's not disdain, if it's just shock sometimes, right? Whoa, you struggle with that? And it's not so much disdain. Even that little kind of response can shut down the communication process, just like that. And so you need to be so guarded about how you're listening and how you're responding to what you're listening. All right? That's what I call more so the active listening. Micah.
Wait, what happens if someone's confronting and saying something that they're not necessarily repentant of? Like, they're coming to you just telling about their life.
Yeah.
What do you do then?
That's a great question. I mean, for instance, I've done this before when I've worked with non-Christians, and someone came to me one time dealing with the issue of depression. And going through their life, then they also revealed to me that they're a practicing homosexual. Now here's a situation. Here's an individual dealing with depression, but as an active lifestyle which is in complete rebellion to the standards of God's holiness. Now I know the depression is because of his sin, but he's not repentant over his sin. He's wanting to deal with this issue. More often than not, what I'll do is I'll deal with a presenting issue, whatever it is they came in to deal with the hopes and prayers that they realize the futility of trying to deal with this issue is just that, futile until we deal with a greater issue. And my hope and prayer is that through our counseling, through the Holy Spirit's conviction through His Word, that they'll come to realize the greater issue of their sin here, and then we can start really dealing with it. I mean, I've worked with people in that scenario. Okay, we'll start with what you come to me with, but they soon start finding out nothing's working. I still keep on having these problems. What's the issue? What am I doing wrong? To which I say, you really want to know? Oh, okay. My opinion is these issues over here. But at this point, they're willing to hear me out more because I was willing to build a relationship with them. I dealt with a presenting problem and the willingness to get to the real problem. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But again, I think that's part of earning their trust. Right. Because at first, my first inclination is to go right to that issue of homosexuality. Well, you need to stop being a homosexual. And then what's that person going to do? If that's not the issue they believe is an issue, what are they going to do? All right, thanks, but no thanks. I'll go somewhere else. Again, I'm not justifying the homosexuality. In fact, I know it is wrong before God. But how I get to that issue is really the key question there, right? I want to earn the ability to get there and develop a trust so as to deal with the real issue at hand here. It's going to take some time, but God's got a lot of it, so I figure that's not for me to rush. That's part of the process. Waiting patiently through silence. This is hard, isn't it? Okay, you ask a question, and this you thought it's a great, deep, really reflective question, and they say nothing. It's a little uncomfortable, isn't it? Yeah? What do you want to do when there's all this silence?
Send some options. know what to say.
Okay, you're not answering my question. Okay, there's A, you could say this, or B, you could say that, or C, you could say that. Now, why do you all of a sudden want to fill in the silence? Why do you feel the urge, okay, they're not answering, I better say something real quick?
What they're thinking is more scary than what they're saying, because we don't know what they're thinking.
Right. What I'm asking is, why do you, the counselor, want to fill up the silence?
I think for the same reason.
Okay.
Like, I want to know what they're thinking.
You want to pull it out as soon as possible, okay? What else? Why do you think you need to fill in that space? It's uncomfortable. Let's be honest, right? I don't like it. There are two people and we're just looking at each other and no one's saying anything, and I figure I better say something. So hey, how about this, right? I mean, the reality is that silence is hard to deal with. But here's the great thing, and I would love for you to start even practicing this, is to realize that silence can be a help, because if you feel uncomfortable, how do you think they're feeling? Really uncomfortable. If you're feeling like this level of uncomfortableness, they're like over here uncomfortableness. And so you need to practice not saying anything with the hopes that they'll do what? That they'll say something. That all of a sudden you're actually keeping the ball in their court instead of picking it back up saying, oh, you don't want to say anything? Because the truth is, they may be thinking something, they just need some time. Or they just need a little shove, which is you not saying anything, to allow them to say something. That silence is actually a good motivator for them as much as it is for you sometimes. To allow the silence to be there to motivate them to think and to respond. Instead of you feeling the obligation, oh, I better fill in the silence somehow. They were just sitting here looking at each other. That's okay. That can be helpful in some ways.
How long do you wait even before maybe rephrasing the question? Or would you rather just be silent?
It depends. That's a good way of looking at it. And we're going to get to this here in the next slide, where sometimes they're just not understanding it, right? And that's why one of the questions I always ask is, does that make sense? Yeah, that does. Okay, silence. Hey, what I asked, did that make sense? No, not really. Okay, then let me put it this way. And then you rephrase it. And that's a great way of looking at it. You might want to assess, are they silent because they're uncomfortable and they're really struggling through the issue and don't want to answer it, but you're forcing them to? Or are they silent because I made so many weird phrases and questions, and I made a question so long that they don't know? I mean, that's one of the things of questioning too, right? I mean, the questions you need to ask should not be the yes-no questions, but at the same time, they should not be these long, exorbitant, extreme questions that... So let me ask you, is it your father or your mother that you had problems with? And if it is your father, was it more so when you were younger or younger? Because if it was your mom, then the realization that it could be a sibling rivalry that we need to examine as well. So what do you think? I mean, information overload, right? And at that point, they're being silent because I have no idea what he just asked me. So you need to clarify. So I think that's a good point that we need to get to as well.
And then you're still communicating, though, with your body language.
Right. And you're anticipating, right? So what do you think of that? I'm waiting. I mean, you're communicating through your eyes, through your posture, through your attitude that I do want a response sometime this millennium, right? I mean, hopefully it won't take that long, but that's the idea, okay? Noting nonverbal cues. Again, understand individuals, again, are communicating much more than just what's coming out of their mouth. I kind of did it there for you, but I'll do it again. I had a kid that came in one time, sat down in his chair, said nothing, and just did this. If a kid comes in from your youth group and does this number, what is he communicating to you? I don't want to be here. In fact, the kid that was meeting with me was court mandated to come meet with me. It wasn't his parents, it was the law. So that much more he didn't want to be there. And he was in no uncertain terms letting me know, I do not like you. I do not want to be here. So what did I do? Did the exact same thing. Sat in my chair, put my legs out, put my hands back, and I said nothing. What do you think he did? Felt uncomfortable to do what? He asked me a question, in fact. He looked at me and says, dude, what's your problem? I said, dude, what do you mean problem? It's like, man, you look like you don't want to be here. I said, well, you look the same way. Well, I don't want to be here. Well, why don't you want to be here? Because my parents made me come here. The courts made me come here. Well, why did they make it? Well, because I got stuck caught doing drugs. You know what just happened? What just happened? He's talking to me. All of a sudden, just by me reflecting exactly what he's doing, we're starting the conversation. And he doesn't even know it, doesn't even realize it, but we're starting to connect. And that will start leading to great. Now, I guarantee you, not in one session did he just start opening up the floodgates of his soul and sharing. But it was a start. It was a start to a process of opening up and sharing and connecting with him based on very clear nonverbal cues. And you need to pick those up instead of seeing him laying out like that, being so offended that you dare not want to be in my wonderful presence and counseling. Realize he's really saying something, and are you willing to engage on that level so as to bring hope and healing? That means looking beyond than just what he's saying, all right? Those are really important. Some other aspects, some techniques, responding, listening, then helping, characterized by action and specific verbal responses. This is not just a session for people to come and just spout their problems, right? This is not confessional time. Part of good counseling is not just hearing the problems, but responding, actually giving encouragement, exhortation in whatever ways they need, right? Beyond that, the ideas of leading, reflecting, questioning, confronting, forming, interpreting, support. I mean, at the end of the day, to me, all of this is essentially what we are doing in terms of teaching. Teaching comes in so many different forms. Sometimes it's up front, it's a lecture. Sometimes it's more of a group and didactic. Sometimes it's an individual one-on-one. To me, though, good counseling is essentially going through all this process to bring hope and encouragement. But remember, what does James say about teaching? Does anyone know that verse? Not many of you should become teachers, lest what? You incur a stricter judgment. The point of James is not to dissuade you from becoming a teacher, all right? He's not saying, oh, you don't want to be a teacher. You're going to get judged stricter. What is James' purpose?
Be careful what you teach.
Exactly. Know what you're teaching, guard it, and live it yourself. Because if you're teaching it and not living it, there is a greater judgment coming your way. And that is a horrendous thing to fall into the hands of a living God. You have the responsibility of teaching people that are coming to you. It's a different format of teaching. It's not a lecture. It's not a class presentation. It's one-on-one ministry of teaching. But realize you have much responsibility in that sense as well. And you need to be very clear about how it is that you're teaching these individuals, knowing that you are held accountable before a holy God with that type of teaching. All right?